If I say military off-roader of World War II, chances are one vehicle pops into your head, the Jeep Willys. It became a rolling symbol of American ingenuity, freedom, and unstoppable mobility on the battlefield. But what if I told you that one of the Jeep's greatest sources of inspiration actually came from its enemy? That before the Jeep ever turned a wheel in Europe or Africa, there was a lightweight German vehicle, born out of the dark ambitions of the Nazi regime, that showed the world a radically different way to build a military off-roader. This is the untold story of the Volkswagen Kübelwagen, the strange little car that, despite its sinister origins, ended up shaping the entire future of off-road design. In the late 1930s, Nazi Germany faced a serious problem. Its army, the Wehrmacht, was expanding rapidly, but its vehicles weren't up to the task. Trucks were too heavy, motorcycles were too unreliable, and existing cars bogged down in mud or sand. What the army needed was a light, versatile, all-terrain vehicle that could be mass-produced quickly. Enter Ferdinand Porsche. Already famous for designing the people's car, what would later become the Volkswagen Beetle, Porsche was tasked with adapting his little civilian project into something that could serve the German war machine. Porsche's genius wasn't in starting from scratch, but in repurposing what already existed. He took the Beetle's air-cooled engine, its lightweight chassis, and its independent suspension, then wrapped it in a new body-flat steel panels, no curves, no frills, designed for speed and simplicity on the assembly line. The result was the Kübelwagen. The name comes from Kübelsitzwagen, or bucket seat car, because early military prototypes had bucket-style seats. Over time, soldiers simply shortened it to Kübelwagen, literally bucket car. At just 725 kilograms, it was astonishingly light. But could such a simple machine really survive the brutality of war? The first thing most people notice about the Kübelwagen is what it doesn't have: four-wheel drive. That's right, unlike the Jeep, which used a robust 4x4 system, the Kübelwagen drove only its rear wheels. On paper, that sounds like a disaster for a military off-roader, but Porsche's design turned this weakness into a strength. The Kübelwagen's rear-mounted air-cooled engine gave it excellent weight distribution. Its feather-light body meant it could float over mud, snow or sand instead of sinking. Its portal axles, with reduction gears at the wheels, increased ground clearance and multiplied torque, letting the car climb slopes that left heavier trucks spinning their tires. The little engine produced just 25 horsepower, but that was more than enough. With a top speed of 80 kilometers per hour, it wasn't a racer, but it didn't need to be. Its job was to carry soldiers, weapons and supplies wherever the army needed them, and it did so with shocking reliability, and perhaps its greatest advantage, simplicity. No radiator meant no coolant leaks, no fragile electronics meant fewer failures. If a part broke, soldiers could replace it with components from a Beetle. Its flat body panels could be hammered straight or welded with scrap metal. This wasn't high-tech German over-engineering, it was rugged minimalism at its finest. The Kübelwagen made its battlefield debut early in World War II and quickly proved itself indispensable. On the Eastern Front, it cruised through the snow and mud of Russia, often outperforming heavier vehicles that froze or, just sank. Soldiers nicknamed it a mechanical sled because of the way it skimmed over deep snow, but its real legend was forged in the deserts of North Africa. In Rommel's Africa Corps, where scorching heat crippled water-cooled engines, the Kübelwagen thrived. Its air-cooled motor didn't boil over, even in 50 degrees Celsius heat. Its low weight let it glide over soft sand that bogged down tanks and trucks. To the Africa Corps, the Kübelwagen became as vital as fuel and ammunition. Allied soldiers who captured them were, honestly, shocked. Here was a car that, without four-wheel drive, could go nearly everywhere their Jeeps could, sometimes even further. British engineers studied captured Kübelwagens carefully, taking notes on the advantages of its light frame and simple mechanics. For many, it was the first time they realized that the best design wasn't always the most complex, it was the most functional. So how did the Kübelwagen compare to its iconic Allied counterpart, the Jeep Willys? Weight, Jeep Willys, around 1,050 kilograms. Kübelwagen, just 725 kilograms. Engine Jeep, 60 horsepower water-cooled. Kübelwagen, 25 horsepower air-cooled. Drive Jeep, 4x4. Kübelwagen, 4x2. Top-speed Jeep, 100 kilometers per hour. Kübelwagen, 80 kilometers per hour. Production Jeep, over 600,000 units. Kübelwagen, around 50,000 units. On paper, the Jeep looks like the clear winner. More powerful, more versatile, and far more numerous. But the Kübelwagen's strength lay in its elegance. Where the Jeep muscled through obstacles, the Kübelwagen danced around them. Where the Jeep relied on torque and traction, the Kübelwagen relied on lightness and smart engineering. It's not that one was better than the other, they were two different answers to the same question. But both carried a common truth: mobility wins wars. When the war ended in 1945, anything tied to the Nazi regime was quickly scrapped or buried. The Kübelwagen, despite its brilliance, was one of those victims. Unlike the Jeep, which became a beloved civilian icon, the Kübelwagen was seen as a relic of tyranny. Production stopped, and most surviving units were either destroyed or abandoned. But the ideas behind it, those never went away. The philosophy of lightweight, functional, easy-to-repair vehicles lived on in post-war designs. The very first Land Rover, launched in 1948, bore a striking resemblance to the Kübelwagen in its flat panels and utilitarian shape. Even the Jeep itself, though far more powerful, carried the same DNA of simplicity and ruggedness that engineers had admired in the German car. Ironically, a vehicle created for conquest ended up teaching the world how to build for endurance. Few people know that the Kübelwagen wasn't alone. Porsche also developed an amphibious version, the Schwimmwagen, complete with a propeller for river crossings. Nearly 15,000 Schwimmwagens were built, making it the most produced amphibious car in history. Collectors today treasure both models, and surviving Kübelwagens often fetch eye-watering prices at auctions. Some even appear in classic car rallies where they surprise onlookers by keeping pace with modern 4x4s. There's also a strange twist. In the 1960s, Volkswagen revived the idea with the Type 181 Thing, a quirky civilian off-roader that looked suspiciously like a modernized Kübelwagen. It was sold in Europe, Mexico, and even the United States, proof that the DNA of Porsche's wartime design still lingered decades later. So what do we make of the Kübelwagen today? On one hand, it was a Nazi vehicle, designed, built, and used by one of the darkest regimes in history. On the other hand, its engineering brilliance cannot be denied. It taught both friend and foe that durability, simplicity, and function often matter more than raw power or complexity. The Kübelwagen's story is a paradox, a car born in the service of oppression that ultimately inspired vehicles associated with freedom and adventure. A machine built for war, whose lessons shaped peacetime innovation. Maybe that's why we can't quite forget it. Because hidden in its ugly origins is a timeless reminder. Sometimes the most powerful designs are also the simplest. The Volkswagen Kübelwagen was never meant to be remembered. But history has a way of keeping the important things alive, even when they come from the unlikeliest sources. It may not be as famous as the Jeep, but its influence runs deep in the DNA of every off-roader we see today. So, what do you think? Did the Kübelwagen truly inspire the Jeep and its descendants? Or was it simply another tool of war that happened to be brilliant? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this dive into forgotten automotive history, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story from the past that shaped our future.